All of you. Yeah. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakrutam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi stuve patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam kartra sutrasya bhashyasya kramad vivaranasya cha. We were discussing some very important sutras of the Samadhipada, and it began with the 17th sutra. That's a very important, it's a foundational sutra, which actually gives us an idea of different stages of samapatti or samadhi. Vitarka, vichara, ananda, asmita, anugama, samprajnata. So different stages of samprajnata yoga or samapatti, the advanced stages of samadhi are discussed here. So you should keep in mind, samapatti stands for absorption in something. So different stages of this complete absorption. In the external objects, then the external, I mean, the gross external and the subtle external, and then the gross, subtle, and the subtle, and beyond all this, there is that kind of absorption which is accompanied by ananda, and then which is that absorption is accompanied by asmita. So those of you who have any doubt, you can listen to the previous discussions, because what we are going to discuss today is, in a way, is a continuation of the same subject. So you can find these technical terms, which many of you are familiar with the Yoga Sutra literature. You find Sthula Samapatti, Savitarka, Nirvitarka, that is in the gross objects. Then in the Sukshma or subtle objects, Savichara, Nirvichara, which though there are 4, but we should generally, we should consider as the Vitarka, which again, its counterpart is Nirvitarka, and Vichara, which is Vichara and Nirvichara. Then that which is accompanied by Ananda and Asmita, Ananda Anugata and Asmita Anugata. Why this is important to remember is the next sutra that we are discussing is a continuation, actually. So in the 46th sutra, Patanjali says all these different stages of absorption or complete concentration together is called Sabija Samadhi. They are not the ultimate. There is some prajnata. They are not the ultimate. But then he makes a very well-known statement, which is very important. You can, those of you who have got a text, please take the 47th sutra. That is very important. Nirvichara Vaisharadhi Adhyarma Prasada. That is an important sutra, because it tells you ultimately what is the benefit of all yoga practices. Nirvichara Vaisharadhi. When you reach a stage of complete absorption in the Nirvichara Samapatti, then you achieve, you accomplish this mental tranquility, peace and happiness. I mentioned at the very beginning, one important sign that you are making progress in any spiritual pursuit is a feeling of inner fulfillment and inner joy. If your mind gets rid of its bitterness, lack of peace, and conflict, and if you start feeling a kind of inner serenity and peace within, and when this inner tranquility expresses itself in your interaction with others, the peace and friendliness and good attitude, what we call positivity. Positivity, as understood in modern psychology, is something extremely superficial. You should think everything in a positive way. Means, I mean, if you fail, you should imagine that you will one day succeed. That's good, no doubt about it. But that is only a matter of our attitude. But the inner tranquility that we are talking about here goes far beyond that. Beyond success and failure, beyond good and bad, we feel a kind of inner contentment, tranquility, and peace. And this inner contentment expresses itself as some kind of a joy and satisfaction. That's why it is important for us to, listen to the great commentator Vyasa, because Vyasa has written a very brief but extremely famous, celebrated commentary on this 47th Sutra. Nirvichara Vaisharadhi Adhyatma Prasadaha. So those who have got the text with you, you can understand clearly what is the implication of each word in the sutra. Nirvichara Vaisharadhi. So Vaisharadhya means when you feel this inner tranquility due to Sattva-guna, peace and fulfillment and tranquility, and not joy as we understand in the purely empirical sense, worldly sense, but a different kind of inner satisfaction and contentment. That is the real meaning of Vaisharadhyam, mean that comes only due to Sattva-guna. Let us say you do something, or you speak something, or you accomplish something. After that, you feel a kind of inner fulfillment, a sense of fulfillment, which is different from the satisfaction that we may get when we get a new job or when we get something related to worldly success. But this Vaisharadhya is different. It is actually the result of new spiritual energy that is generated in our mental system. And actually, it has got a great effect in our mind and body. Our mind becomes light. We are able to take everything in a light manner. Nothing will shake us, nothing will shock us. There, of course, there is one stage when we are not shocked or affected by what is going on around us. That is some kind of insensitivity. Such people are not always good people. People who are totally insensitive to what is going on around them. That is not the result of the Vaisharadhya, the Sattva-guna. It is a kind of cold insensitivity, having no compassion, having no heart, no good feeling towards others. That also can make us cold-hearted. That is totally different from this particular stage of mental progress. Such people are very insensitive. Others may be suffering, they won't care. They have their own little world in which they live, and they won't do anything to help others. They won't speak anything that be helpful to others. But they are living in their own little world. They are not easily shaken. They have some kind of contentment, no doubt. But that is not the result of spiritual energy generate. That's not the result of sattva-guna, increase of sattva-guna. That rather, when a person is sensitive, active, but he uses his ability to act and do things only for the good of others or for his own good, which doesn't do harm to others. So that stage is called Nirvichara Vaisharadyam. What happens is all anger, bitterness, fear, agitation, conflicts, and cold insensitivity all disappear because you generate a lot of sattva guna. So Vyasa says, Bhashya, Ashuddhi avarana mala apetasya prakashatmano buddhisattvasya sattva rajastamobhyam anabhibhuda swachha sthiti pravaho vaisharadyam. Vaisharadyam is defined here by Vyasa. Ashuddhi avarana mala apetas. When a person's mind is completely cleansed off, cleared off all the dirt and filth created by extreme agitation or extreme inertness or ignorance. So tamoguna corresponds to inactivity or ignorance, and rajoguna corresponds to extreme activity without any proper direction. So they create a lot of problems for the mind, anxiety, fear, and so on, due to delusions, ignorance, and so on. So they are all called to be the dirt and filth of mind to be removed. If your cloth is dirty, you have to wash it to remove dirt. If your plate or a vessel is dirty, you have to wash it with soap to remove that. That is mala apetasya, somebody whose mind is cleansed off, devoid of all dirt and filth. What is that dirt and filth? Ashuddhi. Ashuddhi means impurity. What is the impurity of mind? The impurity of mind is anger, hatred, jealousy, agitation, conflicts, irrational fear, delusions, and so on. These are all ashuddhi. So they cover the mind, ashuddhi avarana. So these things should be removed. And when they are removed, what happens? Spiritual energy is generated. You get a lot of sattva guna. Prakashatmanaha. So prakashatmanaha, actually, our mind is naturally effulgent. But that effulgence is covered, it is concealed by a thick outer covering of anxieties, worries, agitation. That is, sattva-guna is completely covered by rajoguna and tamoguna. The sattva-guna should become, it should be revealed, it should come out. For that, you should remove tamoguna and rajoguna. Tamoguna corresponds to ignorance, delusions, inactivity, inertness, insensitivity, etc. Rajoguna, it corresponds to extreme irrational activity, ambition, and so on. When they are removed, what happens? The natural effulgent state of our mind is revealed. That's why prakashatmanaha buddhisattusya rajastamobhyam anabhibhudaha. Then what happens is, then our mind becomes anabhibhuda, means unaffected. Not affected, not shaken, but unaffected by rajoguna and tamoguna. That's why rajastamobhyam anabhibhudaha swachha sthiti pravaha. Swachha means purity, inner purity, sattva-guna of mind. Pravaha means flow. The natural flow of sattva-guna of mind, it happens and we feel it. When we feel it, you may have to do a lot of things in this world. You may be running a big company, you may be very active, but in spite of all that, there is that continuous flow of the incessant flow of Sattva-guna, tranquility and peace within. Frequently, we call such people a Rajashi in the Vedantic tradition. A person who is a king. I mean, he's active like a king, responsible like a king, dynamic like a king. A king cannot afford to be lazy or inactive. He has to be active. He has to succeed. He has to accomplish many things. But normally when he's too active, he becomes perhaps a bit agitated. But this man is not agitated. There is the serenity, tranquility, because his mind is totally unaffected by Rajoguna and Tamoguna. That was Swachchaha Sthiti Pravaha. The purity, mind becomes so pure. So Sthiti Pravaha actually means this continuous flow of stability, tranquility, and peace and contentment. And that is called Vaisharadyam. That is the state of mind of a person who reaches this level of Nirvichara Samapatti. We should remember Nirvichara Samapatti we already discussed. Nirvichara Samapatti stands for that state. I mean, when you are able to concentrate, focus on subtle objects without any conditioning of time and space. That is called Nirvichara Samapatti. When you reach that state, mind becomes calm and quiet, and it is cleansed off. It is completely free from agitation or other mental impurities. In fact, that word used is, Ashuddhi Avaranam ala apedasya. Pranatmanaha buddhisattvasya. The person whose mind or intellect is completely pure, free from all possible agitations. Just as a body has its own undesirable things, which it automatically removes from itself. But how to remove the dirt and filth from the mind? Yoga is the only path. Yoga, in the sense, you should understand yoga in the broader sense. It could be the path of devotion. It could be the path of bhakti yoga or jnana yoga, karma yoga. Karma yoga is included here. Any noble deed, any noble act will generate spiritual energy, will remove the dirt and filth from the mind. And when the dirt and filth from the mind removed, immediately the mind becomes pure. Really buddhisattvasya. That's the idea behind. So karma yoga is okay, jnana yoga is okay, bhakti yoga is okay. All these are meditation. This the nirvichara samapatti is also the path recommended by Patanjali. All these will help us to reach this level of Vaisharadyam. So this is the 40. This is the 47th sutra. Then we will come to another well-known, equally important sutra. Is also well-known sutra because actually it defines Ridambhara Prajna. It's an important topic of discussion in the yoga literature. First, we can read the sutra and try to understand. The sutra is 48. Ridambhara Tatra Prajna. So, the sutra should be understood in relation to the previous sutra. The previous sutra says Nirvichara Vaisharaddhi Adhyatma Prasadara. Adhyatma Prasada means tranquility of mind. Dhyatma means anything related to mind is Adhyatma. Atma is used here not in the sense of Atman as we understand, but in the sense of mind. So this is an important point to remember. So it's a very important subject that every student of Indian philosophy has to keep in mind, in the philosophical hermeneutics of Indian philosophy, and also which included Buddhism also. You find a word can have different meaning in different systems of philosophy, and even within the same system, it can perhaps be used in different context, and depending upon the context, the meaning may also vary, the meaning could change. So adhyatma here is used in the sense something related to mind. Prasada means tranquility and peace. It's an important point to remember. Now, the 48th sutra is Rudambhara Prajna. So here, tatra, there is one word tatra. Tatra means there. That's meaning. At that stage, which means when you get that inner tranquility, the mental tranquility, the inner peace and calmness that is referred to, that is explained in the previous sutra. In that context, what happens? Ritambhara prajna bhavati. Bhavati should be added, means Ritambhara prajna. Ritam means truth. Of course, there are many words in Sanskrit language. Satyam is another word, but in this particular sutra, we should remember Vyasa, the commentator, has to show us the lead. So Vyasa, according to Vyasa, Ritam in this particular sutra means Satyam. Normally, in Shankaracharya's commentary, in certain context, Shankaracharya makes a distinction between Ritam and Satyam. Ritam is what is appropriate, what is right, what is dharma, according to the scriptural injunctions. What the scripture says, this is to be done, that is Ritam for that particular context. According to certain fundamental principles of ethical, moral ideas, this is Ritam. So the Ritam has got a meaning in the sense it is appropriate, it is the idea to be taken in the particular context. But Satyam could mean, and normally it means the universal truth, truth in the universal sense. Satyam is perhaps a much bigger word. Rutancha Satyamcha, sometimes, in the Vedic statement, Ritam and Satyam. So two words are used as if they mean two different things. Ritam Satyamcha. So sometimes Ritam is also Satyam. So Ritam also means Satyam. So it is used in different contexts, in different ways in the Vedic literature. But here we have to take what Vyasa tells us. Vyasa says Ritam here means Satyam. So what happens when you reach that kind of Adhyatma Prasada, when you experience that inner tranquility and peace and inner fulfillment, is a spiritual quality. It is not something related to some kind of happiness or joy that we get when we acquire something. In that context, what happens? We experience a kind of inner awareness. And this awareness is filled with truth. In other words, and that is called prajna. That prajna, the Ritambhara prajna, that higher awareness, the spiritual awareness, which helps you to understand things in the proper context. A sense of propriety, a sense of appropriateness, a natural, effortless, spontaneous sense of propriety and appropriateness, to the tendency to do the right thing and to understand the truth about anything. This skill, this insight, this foresight is generated when you get this Adhyatma Prasada referred to in the previous sutra. Previous sutra we should remember, Nirvichara Vaisharadye Adhyatma Prasada as a result of contemplation or samadhi on subtle objects beyond time and space, which is called Nirvichara Samapatti. So in fact, when the person reaches this Ritambhara Prajna, his judgment will acquire an unerring quality about it. Normally, we judge things, as the previous sutra, next sutras will tell you, based on what we understand intellectually, what we understand through inference. We read a book, we use our reasoning power through inference, and also by using many other tools of epistemology and theory of knowledge, we come to know things, we judge things. But those judgments may not always be correct. You can find the greatest scholars, the most intelligent people frequently go wrong. They may be correct for some time in a limited range of subjects for some time. But they won't have this unerring, this natural insight to see things for what they are, which is not the result of intellectual understanding. So that quality is called Ritambhara Prajna, means awareness filled with truth. That is a literal translation as far as we can go. Now Vyasa says in his commentary, Bhashim, Tasmin Samahita Chittasya Ya Prajna Jayadi Tasyaha Ritambhara Prajna Samjna Bhavati. Now Vyasa says, when a person reaches, when he acquires this Adhyatma Prasada, this mental, internal tranquility, then the person becomes fully balanced. In fact, a kind of balanced attitude is again a natural characteristic of a spiritual person. Again, it is not due to dullness, inactivity. People may take a long time to speak. People, sometimes they have all kinds of, they may be totally insensitive. That is not balance. A natural ability to see and know things properly, and out of that comes a sense of inner balance of mind. That is Samahita Chittasya. That Samahita Chitta means the balanced, when my mental system becomes well balanced. Ya Prajna Jayade, Ya Prajna Jayade. That Prajna which generated at that state, Samahita Chittasya Ya Prajna Jayade Tasya. That means the name of that Prajna is Ritambhara Prajna. Ritambhara Samjna. Samjna means name. The name, the name by which we describe the higher awareness is Ritambhara Prajna. Bhavati. And then Vyasa says, this Ritambhara Prajna, Anurtha Sacha. Anurtha means it is true to its name. Suppose, a person's characteristics in a way describe his true personality, or let us say his name, the name by which you call a person, actually describes his personality. Then you may say that name is Anurtha. I mean, the name, the word follows what the word is trying to explain or describe. This means Anu is one of the prefixes. What it means is when the name of a person is fully justified in terms of the kind of person he or she is, then that name is called Anurtha. So in the context of this Ritambhara Prajna, Vyasa says the name is perfectly true. It is fully justified because that person will be able to see things for what they are. A natural, unerring judgment as to what something is and what something is not. Again, it is not a result of analysis. It's not a result of the tools of knowledge. You know, according to yoga philosophy, Patanjali accepts 3 tools of knowledge. That is Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Shabda. And of course, Vedanta accepts 6 tools of knowledge: Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda, Arthavati, and Upalabdhi, mean direct perception, inference, then verbal testimony, comparison, presumption, and negation. But you may read a lot of books, and you may use your reasoning power. You may be a very brilliant person, and you may do a lot of comparison. And again, you may ask people, and then you may infer. All this you may do, but still you can very often go wrong. But when a person reaches this level of Ridambhara Prajna, he acquires a new tools of cognition and judgment, which is an unerring quality about it. You can see in the writings of and the teachings of great spiritual teachers, frequently they make some predictions. Predictions, normally, you know, people can predict many things. They can prophesy many things, but then the predictions of these great spiritual persons will be of a universal nature, and there will be no ambiguity about it. More not about the worldly things. Normally, they don't predict prophecy about worldly things. Certain judgments based on pure wisdom or pure maturity of intellect or wisdom. And that is called Ridambhara Prajna. Satyameva vibharti na tatra viparyasa gandhopi asti. I mean, that awareness, the prajna, it is full of or filled with truth, wisdom, and reality. And there is not even a little bit of false knowledge. That means, na tatra viparyasa gandha. Gandha means a smell, nothing. There is not even a bit of any kind of false understanding, falsity, or ambiguity about it. That kind of inner awareness is called Ridambhara Prajna. In Yoga Sutra, in Patanjali system, this Ridambhara Prajna is an important quality that comes to a practitioner of a yogi. A yogi, you know, according to Yoga Sutra tradition, moksha is the purpose of moksha, or the meaning of moksha is Prakriti Purusha Viveka. But then yoga philosophers like Patanjali, they always believe in the eternal separation between Prakriti and Purusha. Prakriti as a separate existence. But in Vedanta, Prakriti doesn't have a separate existence. So the ability to acquire this quality of judgment is a natural characteristic of a person who does meditation on some subtle subjects beyond or beyond a time-space equation. That's the meaning of this particular statement. So then Vyasa in his commentary, he quotes one verse, Tatha cha uktam agamanumanena dhyanabhyasa rasena cha tridha pragalpayan prajnam labhade yogamuttamam. So it's a famous statement is quoted by Vyasa. This is a well-known statement. Agama anumanena dhyanabhyasa rasena cha tridha pragalpayan prajnam labhade yogamuttamam. I mean, by study of religious books, that is agama, by inference, by anumana, and by attachment to practice of meditation. All these can help you to acquire this. But the Ridambhara Prajna this higher vision of truth is something that goes far beyond what you normally understand using the tools of knowledge of epistemology. That's an idea, important idea here. If you have got any doubt, you can ask again. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, this word should not be confusing to anybody, because the word Rutam has got a separate meaning in Shankaracharya's Bhashyas. Frequently, it is used in the sense Shastrokta Satyam, means something that is agreeable to the statements of scriptures. That is one meaning. What means, what is appropriate, what is dharma, what is the right thing to do in a particular context. But here, Vyasa says that Krutam here means Satyam itself, the universal truth. Next one is 49th Sutra. Sruda Anumana Prajnabhyasa Vishaya Vishesharthatvat. So, Sruda Anumana Prajnabhyasam Vishaya. So, remember, Sruda means Sravana, Anumana means Mananam. Sravana means reading a book, a text with a proper understanding, with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. That is Sravana, or reading. Manana means Yuktibi Anuchintanam. What you read, you should use your own intelligence, your own reasoning power to understand the true implication of what you read, what you hear. Then, Sudha-anumana prajnabhyam anya vishaya. So, what a person can understand by reading or reasoning power, there's a limit to that. This particular Rudambara Prajna is different from that knowledge derived from reading or by inference or reasoning. That's because it is a particular quality. It has a specific, unique quality about it. In actual practice, you can see this you can find among many spiritual teachers. They write certain things and they make certain statements which perhaps did not make much sense to those who lived in their own time. So frequently, that's why many saints and many spiritual teachers were persecuted by the contemporary, by people who lived in their own contemporary time. They were very often, they received only post-mortem recognition in the spiritual sense. Frequently it happens. That's because they said certain things, they saw certain things. Because when you meditate, when you pray, when you believe in a transcendental higher power, and when you focus your mind onto that, what happens is you develop this unique ability to look deep into the reality of things. That capacity, the faculty of seeing deep into things, is called Rudambara Prajna. So that may not be fully understood by others. That's why here Patanjali says, Sudhanumana Prajnabhyasam Anya Vishaya Vishesharthatva. What they teach or what they understand is much more subtle than what could be understood from books or by reasoning power. Sudhanumana Vijnananta Samanya Vishayam na nahi agamena shakyu visheshaga abhidadum kasmat. So what actually comes from other sources, for example, when you read a book, the instruction that you receive, they may make certain general statements, but they may not be able to make any specific statements, because the practice of meditation sharpens our ability to see things in a different way. Normally, as I mentioned earlier, Our normal way of understanding and cognition are related to our eyes, our ears, our sense of smell, sense of taste, sense of touch, the five senses of perception and mind. This is how we perceive things, we cognize things. Now, the mind with which we normally try to understand is not always stable. The way we understand, the way we cognize things depends upon the state of our mind. So also the senses of perception, eyes, ears, and so on. So there is always a kind of incompleteness or inaccuracy about what we normally perceive using our empirical power of cognition. So we can only get a general idea. That's what Vyasa says, Agavena Sakyu, na Vishesha Abhidadum Sakyam. Ki Visheshena Kritasam Kiyataka Shabdaiti. So the point is, normally what we get from books and using our mind and senses of perception can only give us some general understanding of things. But this Ritambhara Prajna gives us the ability to see things, to deep into things. So that actually, that special capacity is what later came to be known as mystical perception or miracles normally. Sometimes we say this person knew what was going to happen. So it's a miracle. He has some kind of occult, it's not occult power. In fact, Yoga Sutra doesn't accept the very concept of occultism or occult power. What Yoga Sutra tells you is, if you practice, if you sharpen your mind through proper disciplines, by practice of certain disciplines, to sharpen our intellect and mind, our mind also develops unique qualities, new qualities of perception and cognition, to see into specific things, to focus on certain things in a way that normally people do not do or cannot do. And that is a result of this samapatti that we already discussed. That is savitarka, nirvitarka, savichara, nirvichara, and so on. And of course, there are higher samapattis that we are going to discuss again. Sananda, Nirananda, etc. Sasmida, Nirasmida, etc. So this is our different that we'll discuss later. So the ability to see things, and based on the ability to speak and write things, is frequently called miracles in our traditional mystical literature. It is nothing but opening of a new faculty of cognition and perception, the natural quality that anyone can acquire by practice of concentration and meditation. So this nirvichara vaisharadhya, the ability to acquire purity by meditating on subtle things beyond times and space equation, that will give you adhyatma prasada, mental purity, and that pure mind can see things which others cannot see. And that pure mind can write things, can predict things that others cannot see. Because normally, when we try to make inference, we base our inference on time, space, and causation. We take into consideration the time and space and causation. That is called kala desha. Kala means time. Space means desha. And of course, karana. Karana means the hetu, means the causation. That's how we normally see things. But a person, a yogi who acquires this Ridambhara Prajna, he acquires a quality, he acquires a mind which doesn't require dependence upon time, space, and causation. How? By practicing this higher meditation. on subtle things. As a result of this, when mind is completely purified, when mind is completely free from Rajoguna and Tamoguna, and when mind is filled with Sattva-guna, then the mind acquires this quality. Sometimes you find people who are not particularly learned, not necessarily very scholarly, but those who are very humble. Sometimes they speak some great truths. I mentioned this, of course, I'm mentioning this again and again because I cannot think of better examples. From Christian tradition, I can mention 2 examples. From Hindu Vedantic tradition. There are hundreds of examples you can find in mythological literature. The well-known examples that I can mention is from the Russian mystical tradition, the way of a pilgrim. The pilgrim was a humble peasant, not illiterate, but certainly not learned, who was a very simple, rustic person. And when he learned this Jesus prayer, he felt a new enlightenment coming to him. And with that enlightened mind, he speaks great things, which many learned theologians could not even understand. That is true of this Saint Joseph, who was almost illiterate, who accidentally became a priest and who acquired certain qualities, speaking and writing things, which learned theologians could not understand. You can see this. Maybe one of the greatest example I can give is in the life of Swami Adbhutananda, who was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. Now, he was not a scholar, not illiterate, but barely little bit of reading and writing he may have learned. He was a humble person, but he was taught by Sri Ramakrishna, he was taught some spiritual disciplines and lived with Sri Ramakrishna, he served him. And as a result, this man acquired certain qualities. So it so happened on one occasion, a great Pandit was expounding well-known words from the Tattwamayananda. And that Pandit was explaining, maybe he was explaining the Shankaracharya's commentary, the commentary by Shankaracharya. And listening to this Swami, his name was Latu Maharaj, his name was Swami Adbhutananda. He heard this and then he said, yes, it is so, it is so. He made the statement in such a way that one could feel, listening to him, one could feel that he knew it for a fact. What others were reading and discussing and expounding in the philosophical language of Shankaracharya, for this humble person, Swami Adbhutanandaji, it is a fact, it is a physical fact. Now, where did he get that knowledge, the ability to feel the truth of what he was listening to? Again, that's a result of this Ridambhara Prajna. We should remember the Ridambhara Prajna is a natural characteristic that comes to any spiritual seeker at some stage of his spiritual evolution. It can come to a devotee, it can come to a karma yogi, it can come to a jnana yogi, it can come to any person who is a spiritual seeker. When we transcend our present level of mind, when we transcend our present framework of empirical cognition and understanding, when the mind reaches another level of comprehension, then it doesn't require the normal tools of knowledge. It can connect itself with truth without an intermediary, without the mediation of a book or a teacher of anything, because that truth is self-revealed from within ourselves. And that quality is called Ridambhara Prajna, the Prajna or awareness which is non-different from truth, which is filled with truth, which bears the truth. That's the literal meaning, Ridambhara. Idea. Now, after this, we can have interaction. You are most welcome to ask questions and then we'll respond. We'll continue the discussion of this subject again in the next. The subject continues in the coming sessions also.
Thank you, Maharaj. I have raised my hand,
Yeah,
and I don't see any questions as of
yeah,
yet on either YouTube or on Facebook.
yeah.
So I'm going
Thank
to
you.
go ahead and ask you about um, these absolutely marvelous sutras 47, 48,
Yeah,
and the language
yeah.
that we try to capture in English
Of course.
as
Yeah,
the commentaries are translated. I'm going to read some of them that
yeah,
I took notes on. Super reflective balanced state,
yeah,
subjective luminosity,
yeah,
essential cognition, and then
yeah,
you elaborated as things like special capacity,
yeah,
sharpened intellect,
yeah,
uh, new qualities of perception and cognition.
yeah,
And when I think about all the effort to capture something that pretty much every student
yeah,
at any subject and any practitioner of any profession, when you become super adept through
yeah,
concentration and the purification of
yeah,
obstacles, it happens this way that your abilities to
yeah,
figure things out and see things more deeply, and in poetry also,
yeah.
just seems to
Exactly.
happen
Precisely.
naturally.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
here we are trying to capture this in these terms, and they're all very beautiful terms. But
yeah,
it seems to me, if I'm not mistaken, that the essential character of this is really potentially a very common experience.
yeah. You mentioned poetry, for example. As I mentioned earlier, poet is called a kavi in Sanskrit language. The kavi is not just somebody who writes verses or couplets. A kavi is called mantradashta, means the one who sees deep into the word, the sacred word. In the Vedic language, one who can cognize, perceive things from a transcendental plane, from a higher level of perception or cognition. As you mentioned, this Ridambhara Prajna, in the broader sense, can be found in an expert doctor who has practiced 40 years, 50 years, uh, maybe a child specialist, or any person, among carpenters, artisans. There are certain people, you find some people, car mechanics who identify themselves with the job, they call their car he or she because they don't call it it, and you can find. And you can find a kind of identification uh, to, with the work they do, with the tools with which they do their work. Now, that kind of identification is the result of this higher concentration. This is found even in the field of empirical life situations. Now, if we can turn this to our own mind, then mind also acquires certain qualities. Just this an expert mechanic, car mechanic, is able to do work so efficiently, so effortlessly with his hands. Similarly, if we can train and discipline our mind in a different direction, the mind also develops certain unique qualities of perception and cognition. But of course, there is one important point. Remember, this Nirvichara Vaisharadhe Adhyatma Prasadaha. That important sutra is to be always kept in mind. Nirvichara Vaisharadhe Adhyatma Prasada. That is 47th sutra. The Adhyatma Prasada is there. Adhyatma Prasada means inner purity and tranquility of mind. Now that may not that that one may not get by just becoming an expert in an empirical field, in an empirical earthly activity. Of course, an expert car mechanic may acquire tremendous joy and satisfaction by doing a good work, by repairing a car. No doubt about it. By doing a good job to the best of his satisfaction, he will certainly acquire a kind of inner joy. But that joy may not help him when he's facing a problem, when the stock market collapses or he loses money in the bank or something like that happens, they were shocking experience. The expert car mechanic who can identify with his committed job, so much of commitment and love with which he does his work, that expertise may not help him to withstand the shock when he loses money in the bank or when his stock markets collapse. For that, you need another quality for the mind. That is called Adhyatma Prasad. Now, that is the result of this higher concentration. That is called Nirvichara Samapatti. That's an important point. So, of course, we can, if you stretch this example in different ways, you can see a little bit of this inner joy in many persons when they do their own chosen jobs, or when they do very well something in which some area in which they're experts. That is true, kind of satisfaction. Having done my job properly, it gives me great joy. That's true. But that may not help me to withstand some other difficulties if I don't practice disciplining my own mind through yama, niyama, and then of course asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and then this samprajnata yoga, all these 6 types of samapattis. 4 are mentioned, but they can be stretched in different directions. 6 you can find. So that is an important point in dream of the mind, this idea.
Very good. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we will continue discussion in the next session.
Oh, there's another question. I see.
Yeah, most welcome, most welcome, most welcome.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah, namaskar.
Sri Ramakrishna, when his nephew passed away, we read that he grieved.
Yeah.
Is that Adhyatma Prasada or?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, true. I mentioned this earlier, we should always remember this Adhyatma Prasada is not total insensitivity. It's an important point. It's not total insensitivity. So you find when a person progresses in yoga practices, actually his compassion is consideration for others, is all these acquire a subtle and higher quality. So you can find in all spiritual teachers like Sri Krishna or Christ or Buddha or Sri Ramakrishna or Shankara, anyone you take, there are 2 aspects to them: the divine aspect and the human aspect. The human aspect is never forgotten. You can find this in all great spiritual teachers. If they completely transcend the human aspect, they may become automatons. So really never so. So the natural compassion, grief at some unfortunate event, it's natural, but they quickly overcome that grief. I can give one good example. This is a well-known example. You can keep this in mind. Sri Ramakrishna had a famous disciple. His name was Keshav Chandra Sen. He was one of the most prominent intellectuals of Calcutta city at that time, and he was the leader of Brahma Samaj. He was the most celebrated figure in the Brahma Samaj hierarchy after its founder, that is Raja Rammohn Roy. And this man was such a prominent person, and he was well known all over India at that time. Now, in fact, it so happened he was completely transformed, and he became a great devotee by coming in contact with Sri Ramakrishna, because he was not even willing to go accept religion as normally understood in Hindu tradition. Later, he underwent a complete transformation and became a great devotee. Sri Ramakrishna said, when he first, when Keshav Chandra Sen first falls sick, once he fell sick, seriously sick, Sri Ramakrishna went to the nearby temple and offered coconut water, the sugar, to the deity in a temple of Divine Mother in Calcutta. Because the Keshav Chandra Sen was a great devotee, fell sick This one occasion. Then Sri Ramakrishna visited Keshav Chandra some years later, just a little before, maybe a short time before he passed away. At that time, Keshav Chandra had become much more sick. He had become very frail. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, long ago, some years ago, when I heard you are sick, I went to the nearby temple and I prayed to Divine Mother for your health, and I offered tender coconut with sugar. But this time I didn't feel anything, Sri Ramakrishna says. And actually Keshav Chandra Sen passed away within a very short time. So later, it is said in some other scriptures that Sri Ramakrishna mentioned earlier, this time he is not going to live long. Sri Ramakrishna mentioned this at that very time. Nobody thought that Keshav would pass away so shortly. But Sri Ramakrishna says, I don't feel anything right now. I don't feel like going to the temple and pray for him, just as I did last time when you felt sick. So you can find Sri Ramakrishna had compassion at one time, but he could also keep his mind away. He could completely detach himself from any personal attachment, because he knew this man was going to pass away very soon. So on the one hand, you find all great spiritual teachers will have compassion. Human compassion that you normally find in a loving brother, father, or mother is natural for every spiritual seeker. This is an important point, remember. It is not attachment. It is pure compassion. Grief. This grief, this human sensitivity is very natural. It's an integral part of our spiritual evolution. As we focus our mind on something higher, the first thing that happens is our attitude towards everyone becomes more spiritual, much more broader, more humane. So humanism and spirituality actually goes side by side. This is an important point, remember. Much more so than in any anthropomorphic religious traditions, where in the anthropomorphic religious traditions, your affinity, your loyalty to one group of people who share your ideas of God, that is good, no doubt. But in non-anthropomorphic traditions, where spirituality is defined as something essentially universal, humanism in its universal dimension is another name for spirituality. Sri Ramakrishna was a classic example of a sublime human being and also a spiritual person. That's an important point.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Pranam, Maharaj.
Namaskar, most welcome. Thank you.
Yes, when you were talking about the samadhi and the purification of the mind, you said the only way to do this is through yoga. And when I heard that, I thought, I need to go to my yoga studio and practice yoga asanas.
Yeah.
And when I thought about it further, you mentioned like 3 paths. You said karma yoga, bhakti yoga,
Yeah.
jnana yoga.
Yeah.
And you may have mentioned Raja Yoga. I'm not sure, but my question is the path of Hatha Yoga recognized by Patanjali and by Vedanta as a bona fide, legitimate path to reach like higher states of consciousness? One author says that the Hatha Yoga Pradipika has a chapter. Has a chapter, one of the last chapters about reaching samadhi. Yeah. So that's my question.
Yeah. Now, Patanjali doesn't give much importance to the physical part of yoga. In fact, the word asana is mentioned, sthira sukham asana. So if you ask Patanjali, he may probably say that all the yoga postures are meant to help you to be able to sit in a steady posture for a long time without any feeling of effort. So sukha means in a very effortless, easy manner and for a long time. That's what Patanjali would have said. Now, you mentioned earlier the Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, etc. I mentioned this when I was discussing the first sutra of Sadhana Pada, that is Tapaswadhyaya Ishara Pranidhananani Kriya Yoga. The Kriya Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga are all included by certain commentators who wrote commentaries on Yoga Sutra. Coming to your question directly, Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga as such is not recognized to be a path leading to moksha or spiritual enlightenment by Vedantis. At the same time, I must tell you that many, if not most of the great Vedantis were great practitioners of yoga, because you can see indications of that in their commentaries, in their books. Shankaracharya, the greatest of Advaita philosopher, himself has written Vivarana. Vivarana is one of the commentary based on Vyasa's commentary. Shankara is one of the triple names, the trinity of Yoga Sutras. Tuve Patanjalim Vyasam Shankaram cha Munitrayam Katra Sutrasya Bhashisya Kramat Vivaranasya cha. So Patanjali is the Sutrakara, the author of Sutra, and Vyasa is the author of commentary, Bhashya, and Shankaracharya is the commentator of the gloss written Vivarana, is based on Vyasa's commentary on Yoga Sutra. So the point is, Hatha Yoga as a physical exercise is not taken at all seriously by Vedanta, Advaita Vedantis or any others. But then it seems that the Hatha Yoga Pratipika, Gheranda Samhita, all these, Shiva Samhita, all these deal with different postures. Yoga postures must have been written by some great spiritual personalities who may have found the need to develop these physical postures. No doubt about it. Some of the physical postures can be helpful. For example, Padmasana, people can practice Padmasana. It can help you to sit for a long time without any shaking your body. It's possible. So many of these are good. But then extreme, I don't know if the yoga studios you're talking about actually teach anything spiritual. I'm not sure. Perhaps you can, you are better judge on this subject. I've never been to any yoga studio, but I feel they are doing a wonderful job. They are teaching these physical postures, which may be helpful for people for maintaining health. That's a great thing, no doubt about it. But we should not consider it as a direct spiritual exercise. Even they won't claim to be so. I don't think so. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, some of the studios do include Patanjali's teachings.
Yeah,
Others,
that's very
yeah, others don't. It's more of a physical culture.
Yeah, there are certainly some yoga teachers who teach yoga, yamas and niyamas. They talk about the control of food. There are many great yoga teachers. Actually, you know, the great yoga teachers, beginning with Vivekananda was the first one who translated English. His exposition is full of great instructions for the practitioners of Hatha Yoga also. And Swami Sivananda Rishikesh, the founder of Divine Life Society, and his successors, his followers, his disciples and students who spread yoga all around the world, they all emphasize the importance of yamas and niyamas, etc. disciplines. So, in fact, they were great examples of the right approach to Hatha Yoga, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yogi has a hand up.
Yeah, please.
In this context, Mark's comments about Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga, Pradipika and Grand Samhita also talk about pranayama extensively. In Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Sutra 34 says Prachardana Vidarana.
In Patanjali
Do
also.
we understand?
but Patanjali doesn't elaborately describe this, this inhaling, exhaling, and all that. He mostly emphasizes the importance of kumbhakas. But it is automatic, without Puraga and Rejaga, you cannot have kumbhaka, of course. Yeah. Please continue, Yogi. You are most welcome. I'm happy you are a yoga professional, so perhaps you can throw additional light on this subject. You are most welcome. Please continue. Please continue.
Thank you, Maharaj. I'm certified yoga teacher from Sivananda yoga tradition.
Most welcome. Please go ahead.
There they emphasize importance of pranayama to control the mind and calming down, and also energizing Kundalini, and through Kundalini awakening by pranayama practices, one can get higher levels of mind calming down and other achievements. That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What I understand is that the Hatha Yoga is part of Raja Yoga, but many people separate Raja Yoga from Hatha Yoga, and they think the Hatha Yoga part is just physical. And this one teacher is saying, if somebody has made a study of the Hatha Yoga, Pradipika, and other ancient texts on Hatha Yoga, they all, there's a chapter that speaks of samadhi or union with the Supreme Spirit. And what is the culmination also of Raja Yoga? It is also samadhi. So where's the difference between the two?
Perhaps Yogi can throw additional light on the subject. Yogi, most welcome.
I don't have much knowledge in that area, Maharaj. Other than some Hatha yogis, they say it both culminate in the same state, even if we use the body, and which is always present, and breath, which is always present. If we can manipulate those two energies, there is nothing beyond that that mind is constituted of. Mind is direct result of the processes of body and breath. So mind can be controlled by breath and body without any additional steps. That's what I heard.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. Is there any more question, or shall we conclude?
I see no further questions.
No question. Thank you so much. Yeah, please. Any question?
Thank you, Swami.
Any question? No,
Swami.
No, okay. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.